So, you like to play Castlevania? Normally, I like to talk about obscure titles that aren't remembered or celebrated as the classics. So one might think it's odd of me to bring up such a purely classic series. Castlevania started off as a hard-as-nails series on the NES, using horror icons like Dracula and Frankenstein's monster as the baddies. Even from just the first game, Castlevania boasts impressive visuals, fine-tuned gameplay, and a totally rockin' soundtrack. As the series grew and evolved, there was an obvious shift from the linear, stage-based, fair but challenging formula to a format with more open exploration and RPG leveling mechanics, to ease the difficulty. Personally, I've always been partial to the linear types like Castlevania 3 and Bloodlines, which is why today we're talking about Castlevania the Adventure ReBirth. ReBirth was released as a WiiWare exclusive in 2009. There's no disc or cartridge that it was ever printed on, and it was never ported to other digital storefronts. Considering that WiiWare service shut down in 2019, the only way to play this today is on a Wii that already has it downloaded, or through more illicit means found online. For this video, we're of course playing it on original hardware, but I wouldn't knock anybody playing it any other way, since it would literally be lost to time otherwise. But before we can even get into ReBirth, we first need to talk about Castlevania the Adventure, which ReBirth is a remake of. Well, actually, ReBirth pulls from several games in the series, but it is claimed to be a remake of Adventure specifically. Castlevania the Adventure was first released in 1989 for the original Game Boy. Sadly, no color yet. This game was released just a few months before Castlevania 3, so there was only the first two games to draw upon for reference. Controlling Christopher is about the same as playing the first two games. Pressing the B button will do a lash with the whip, but it doesn't come out right away. Christopher rears his arm back for a moment, and then cracks the whip forward. Jumping also has its classic cadence. You can jump straight up or to the side, but you can't control your momentum in midair. I know a lot of people find these two aspects of the older games to feel weighty and unresponsive, but it's important to understand that's basically the point. The Belmonts in lore are described as towering musclemen of terrifying power and resilience, and at one point were asked by the people of Wallachia to leave the country because their presence unnerved the commoners. But they are still humans. Humans going up against monsters from the darkest corners of hell itself. When playing as a Belmont, you're supposed to feel at a sort of disadvantage, because in universe, you are. An analogy I'd like to make is comparing the Belmonts to the hunters from Monster Hunter, or the protagonists from Resident Evil. They also take on their own series form of literal monsters. Creatures with incredible resilience and bizarre powers that defy nature. The characters you play as in these games are also just humans. Sure, hunters are practically all Olympians, with amazing stamina and strength, and Leon S. Kennedy was trained by Special Forces, so they do have an edge when taking on their monsters, but it takes a lot of effort to deal with even one. All this to say, classic Castlevania games reward the sort of careful steps kind of play. It's not to say you can't play fast and loose, but doing such requires a masterful amount of skill and practice. I can also safely say it is near impossible to play Adventure with any degree of speed, because the game moves so damn slow. I'm not sure if the game's performance was a technical limitation or a fault of the programmers, but considering there are plenty of Game Boy games that run at a decent pace, I'm willing to believe it was the latter. Christopher's whip can be upgraded twice, with the base level being a simple leather whip, level 2 being a chain whip, and level 3 adding a fireball that is released from the tip. This mechanic is somewhat unique to the adventure games. It is featured sometimes as a bonus effect for some spells or equipment in later games, but never as a part of the core experience. On the flip side, getting hit once will level down the whip, making the level 3 upgrade a sort of fleeting experience. Something else worth noting is the lack of sub-weapons. Across the series, the player can usually pick up extra tools that drop from candles. Staples include the axe, which is thrown at an upwards angle, holy water that has a limited range but powerful offense, and the cross, which is thrown out like a boomerang. None of these weapons appear in Adventure, and as a result, fighting enemies boils down to spamming the whip or jump attacks. It's not great. Stairs also don't return, which is another point of contention among fans. It can be hard to get on the stairs, it can be hard to get off the stairs. In their place, Adventure has ropes. Christopher can climb up or down a rope, but beware of jumping off of one. He kinda drops like a sack of lead, so care must be taken to land on a platform. Well, there's only 4 stages to Adventure, so let's go over them briefly. Stage 1 starts pretty simple. Mudmen endlessly drop out of the trees, birds go past you and then turn to dive bomb. We also have the eyes. Ah, yes, the giant rolling eyeballs. Another oddity that originates here. You can crouch and whip them or just jump over the darn thing. They have a weird, out-of-place charm. But I can't get over the fact that anytime they spawn out of the ceiling, the developers placed an invincibility power-up right next to it, so you don't get hurt when you climb the rope. This is such an obvious cop-out. Like if you can't make the eyes stop spawning when the player reaches the rope, then don't have the eyes drop from there in the first place. Next up are these platforms that drop as soon as you land on them. Well, look at that. Something can move fast in this game. You have to jump as soon as you touch them. There's no room for error. Speaking of no room for error, this. So, I usually try to be lenient on the people who made games like this. Maybe this was their first video game job. Maybe they were on a time crunch or poorly trained, something like that. But this is just unpleasant. You can't tell me somebody put all these max distance jumps in a row and thought to themselves, yeah, this'll be fun. The boss of this stage is, this guy. Is he a knight? Maybe a minotaur? Well, whatever he is, you just hit him and then back up. Just touch him real quick and go. It's the first boss, so I can't knock it for being a little easy. In stage 2, you encounter what appears to be a lizard head that shoots fireballs that bounce off the walls. I think they're supposed to be the skeleton dragon heads, but they don't look anything like that. There's also that guy. Guess what? He's not fun to fight, so I always try to avoid him when I can. The eyeballs return, and if you hit them, they explode and destroy some of the bridge. So here, it's better to jump over them. At the end of the bridge is a rope going down, which leads to this screen. There's 2 paths leading out of here, which leads to another screen with 2 paths. It's like a maze. You have to guess the right route to take. Otherwise, it loops you back to the bridge. It's a cool idea, but ultimately, this area just wastes your time. The boss is a bunch of guys that jump out of holes in the background. They leap all over the place, so it's better to hit them before they leave the hole. Stage 3 starts off looking really plain. Oh yeah, you can jump into those spikes and die from full health, so don't jump. As you go forward, This giant screw starts turning and pulls the ceiling and floor together. You have to hit it until it breaks to set it back. I think this is pretty cool, from a gameplay and technical standpoint. I guess they couldn't fit a background on this stage and have the moving level. Next up is this climbing section where the spike-covered floor is constantly rising. This might be the most demanding part of the whole game. You have to do everything at the precise time you can. Take this part. You have to climb the rope high enough to drop off and land on this platform. You have to land before this bug crawls to the edge, because if you wait till he turns and goes back, you won't have enough time to get to the other side. And, oh yeah, this is what we needed right here. Tiny platforms right next to falling ones. And how about this one? My jumps are perfect, but I was too fast because there was no space at the top of the screen. This is what I mean when I say you have to do everything at precisely the right time. So I get to the top and think, hey, it stopped. I can take a breather now. Nope. Now there's a spike wall chasing me. Still just as stingy with the pace you have to make, but now I'm going to the left. I guess now I should mention I'm playing this game through the Castlevania collection on PlayStation. And yes, I have been using save states to checkpoint my progress. More specifically, I've started using them very liberally since this level began. I know some people get uppity about exploits like that, but in my defense, it's Castlevania Adventure. Using save states is the equivalent of putting ketchup on roadkill. It helps greatly, but not by much. The boss of stage 3 is a Birdman, I think. He swoops down and hits you, so hitting him can be difficult. I eventually discover that you can crouch at this spot to avoid his attacks, and occasionally stand up to whack his ankles. I feel no remorse. The final stage features these spike poles that extend outward. You have to jump on them in some instances. And this is another gimmick that I like. I just wish you could tell when they were going to fire, because as is, they just jut out without warning. There's a lot of these things, just a whole lot. There's also a hallway with like 3 of the first boss in a row. He's the same as before, but if you walk off screen from his origin point, he'll respawn. You really don't want to get sandwiched between 2 of them. Finally, it's time to show down with Dracula. His first phase isn't really difficult at all, but his second form kind of is. The winning strategy I found for this part was to crouch whip his bat projectiles, sneak in 1 or 2 jump attacks, and then swap to the other side and repeat. With Dracula slain, Castlevania crumbles, and the humans are safe for another 100 years. Or are they? Castlevania 2: Belmont's Revenge is the direct sequel to Adventure. This one has an intro text scroll stating that 15 years after Dracula's defeat, Christopher's son, Soleil, has come of age to become a vampire hunter. However, Dracula's dark power has corrupted Soleil, and 4 mysterious castles suddenly appear in the land. It's up to Christopher to venture into these new castles, defeat the dark power within, and save his son. Belmont's Revenge features 4 stages that can be tackled in any order, kinda like a Mega Man game. First up, let's take on Crystal Castle, which has the most bopping music I've ever heard on a Gameboy cartridge. All of Christopher's moves from the first game return, but he can now whip while hanging on to a rope. The whip upgrade is only lost when hurt by specific enemies, And there are two sub-weapons to use. Holy Water and the axe. Bizarrely, the Japanese version has no axe, but instead the cross. I think that actually makes the game harder since there's no way to attack up. Crystal Castle opens up with some platforms that break if you stand on them for too long. Enemies like the dragon heads and eyeballs return all throughout this game. So, I get to this part with a spike wall going back and forth, and there's no way to get past without taking a hit. That is, until I realized you can hold down and the jump button to slide down a rope fast. That's a new change. When I get through this door, the music changes. This lets you know the boss is close. It's a crystal that turns into a wizard who commands this cloud to shoot a lightning bolt towards you. When the bolt hits the ground, it'll spread out left and right, so you have to make sure to jump over it. Also, you can only hurt this boss when they're a crystal. I think it's kinda cool. Plant Castle is up next. I like the detail of flowers in the background blooming when you walk by. There's also these skeletons that climb ropes and throw boners at you. They can be tricky to fight. And what are these, jellyfish? This seems really out of pocket. Gosh, do you think that's enough eyeballs? Like, jeez, stop already. The boss is these two goat demon statue things. You can't hit them when they hold their trident up, and you can only reach them with the whip when the platform raises. Having the axe here is real good. Also, I'm just noticing now, they have slightly different horn designs. That's neat. Rock Castle is up next. It's got an ancient Egyptian feel to it. Very cool. The spike poles make a return, but this time they do a little flash to indicate they're about to fire. Good. Oh yeah, this room. The gimmick here was pretty puzzling to me. So at first it seems the lights flicker on and off at random. But get this. When you knock out a candle, the room goes dark. I know that must seem obvious, but this is Castlevania. You hit candles to get stuff. It's the equivalent of a question block in Mario. I don't even think about it. I just hit the darn thing and get a little prize. Also, these bugs won't move unless it's dark. Other than that, you just have to worry about not falling into a pit. This stage's boss is a really big knight dude. Way more intimidating than the first game. So, you hit him a few times and then his armor breaks off. He's way more mobile now, and he can throw an energy wave from his sword. He could be pretty tough to beat. The last stage to go over is Cloud Castle. This place has a lot of rope climbing. In particular, there are these ropes with a spike on the end. As soon as you grab onto one, the rope retracts into the ceiling where the spikes are, so you have to be careful. There's also these pulley systems that change the rotation every few seconds. You have to jump from rope to rope with good timing. The boss is two skeleton dragon heads from the wall. Well, actually one is just a normal human skeleton, but it has the same spirit. The way they attack is pretty cool. They send their ribcage blades back and forth between each other. You just gotta get the timing down and wail away on them. After the forward castles fall, Castlevania emerges from the ground, and Christopher heads inside. It's comprised of two stages with plenty of platforming challenges pulled from throughout the game. These boomerang sickle guys return and they look a lot better. The boss of the first stage is a skeleton dragon snake that burrows in and out of the narrow hallway. It's pretty cool, but it seems impossible to not take a few hits throughout the fight. The boss of the second part is Soleil, controlled by Dracula's darkness. I'm sorry, this is just kinda bad. Belmont's Revenge is overall a huge step up in quality over Adventure, and I didn't have to resort to using save states as much. Until this fight. Soleil is just as mobile as Christopher, but he does a ton more damage. He can also power through your attacks and keep moving. Trading blows with him is a pure loss. The best strategy I found was to throw holy water at him when he stops to throw his swords. The swords in question will track your position, but dodging them isn't so hard. Dodging the swords and Soleil, however, is almost impossible. It really feels like you have to get lucky with this one. After beating Soleil, he comes to his senses and urges his father to head further in and finish off Dracula. At a glance, this fight seems similar to Adventure's, but it's much harder. Dracula will teleport around and summon these orbs that fly outward in a spiral pattern. Dodging them is quite difficult, as you need to already know where the safe spot is. Save states really helped me out here. Other than knowing where to stand, the fight is real simple. Just jump and hit his head when the opportunity presents itself. After the Dark Lord's defeat, father and son watch as Castlevania crumbles. Again. All in all, I'd say Adventure is okay for the time, but aged poorly, while Belmont's Revenge is mostly excellent even today, barring the last few bosses, of course. The Castlevania series would continue on, refining its signature gameplay and innovating new elements as well, until the release of their final, classic-styled game on WiiWare. Okay, now we can look at the thing I wanted to talk about at the start of this video. Castlevania Adventure ReBirth kicks off with a basic explanation of the lore. Every 100 years, a Belmont rises to challenge the newly revived Dracula in his accursed castle. This game features the return of weirdo enemies like the Mudmen, giant eyeballs, and these green pustule things that are similar to the dragon heads from the Gameboy games. Is this what they were supposed to look like the whole time? I didn't see that at all. Also, out with the ropes. In with the stairs. To be fair, the ropes were okay, but come on, Castlevania needs the stairs. Christopher's whip can be upgraded to fireball status, but only for a short while. Once this green meter depletes, the fireball is lost. I feel this is a pretty good balance for it. Like, it's nice to have, but not necessary for the core game to function. Otherwise, the only way you'll lose your whip upgrade is if you lose a life. The available sub-weapons include the axe, holy water, cross, knife, and the key. Wait, the key? It's not really a weapon so much as a tool. It's used to open locked doors, but only while you're carrying it. If you never pick it up or replace it with something else, you'll have to take another path. The locked doors usually lead to a bonus room with some prizes, or an alternate area that's easier. I guess it wouldn't be a Castlevania Adventure game without something weird that was never in a previous game. I should also mention this game has two modes, Normal and Classic. Normal lets you control yourself in midair, similar to Castlevania 4 and later titles, while Classic restricts you to the jumping style found in 1, 2, 3, the Game Boy games, and Bloodlines. Personally, I prefer Classic, as the game was designed with its control scheme in mind anyway, but it's nice that they give you the option. On the other hand, Classic also takes away the axe and the knife, leaving you with the cross, holy water, and key. I suppose this is to make it more like Belmont's Revenge, more specifically the Japanese version. Stage 1 is pretty simple. It's an easy enough romp to get you accustomed to that Castlevania feel. The mid-boss is a giant bat from the first game, and the stage boss is a giant eyeball. Seeing this for the first time was a real delight. Stage 2 has haunted armors that you can drop chandeliers on, and mermen in the cavern under the castle. The mid-boss is a sticky goo that you hit in its nucleus. The stage boss is a muscly guy that turns into a skinny guy that hops around the room. I'm thinking the way you fight him is inspired by the knight from Belmont's Revenge. But as for his actual character, his name is listed online as Hyde. So I guess this is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? That's actually pretty cool. Stage 3 is where the training wheels come off, as well as that song from Crystal Castle! We got skeletons that hang from ropes and throw bones, and spike poles that shoot from the walls. Just like before, you have to use them as platforms sometimes. The mid-boss is a real skeleton dragon head from the wall. After him is the torture chamber, filled with swinging blades, spinning blades, and falling spike traps. Timing is very important here. The boss may be very familiar if you've played Symphony of the Night. It's a giant magical sword that conjures more sharp weapons to throw at you. Stage 4 has the sickle boomerang guys from the Gameboy games, as well as Giant Ghost Skull also from Symphony. There's even a bit where the bridge falls while you're running across. There is one annoying part to this level. You see, if you just go along like usual, you'll come across a locked door that you can't open. You have to go back to find a key to open it. But the layout of this area isn't consistent. Look at what happens if I go in and out the same door. I end up in different places. It's like a maze. Figuring it out isn't too hard, but you do get stopped by this room of like 100 flame skulls stacked on top of each other. It's surprising at first, but real funny when you drop a bunch of them into the pit. But if you mess up, you need to go back for the key. That means going through this room a couple more times. Gets a little tedious at that point. The mid-stage boss is a random vampire woman. Maybe that's supposed to be Elizabeth Bartley from Bloodlines? The main boss is the golem, and he's huge. When he pounds the ground, smaller golems drop from the ceiling that you have to push through to get to his weak point. Stage 5 has these mech guys that fall over when they die, but they don't go away. You can walk into their spikes, so you have to hit them a couple more times to make them disappear. This area also features the ever-popular Clock Tower stage that was sorely missing from the Game Boy titles. There's plenty of turning gears and swinging pendulums, so be careful where you step. The mid-boss is Frankenstein's monster, or rather Frankenstein's mage. He manipulates lightning that either goes forward as a ball or trails along the ground. He's not hard, but you have to be careful. The stage boss is Death, and he's as tough as ever. Dodging sickles is no joke, and he's got new moves that take up a lot of real estate on the screen. The final stage is a one-on-one with the Count of the Castle, and the prelude music is very familiar.
As ever, the ally of worthless humans.
Dracula's first form is similar to his first appearance, but instead of jumping over his fireballs, you have to crouch and hit the lowest one. His second form is also a classic. a large bat monster that jumps around, dropping projectiles and spewing fiery breath. His third form is more unique. Dracula becomes a giant demonic face suspended in midair. He attacks by summoning lightning, fireballs, and eyes. I'm glad we could fit in more eyes. All three fights present their own challenge, and if you die in just one of them, you are sent to the beginning of the stage. Being as this is on the Wii, I couldn't use save states throughout this whole playthrough. Not that I even would have wanted to. Unlike the Game Boy games it draws from, ReBirth is fun all throughout. It takes ideas like the fireball whip and spike poles and makes them work in a way that is easy to understand, but difficult to master. I know I'm comparing a couple of Game Boy games to a WiiWare exclusive from 20 years later, but really, I just wanted to point out that even games which didn't land well in their time can still have good ideas sprinkled in them. ReBirth is tangible proof of that statement. Well, it would be tangible if you could legally own a physical copy, but that's a different conversation entirely. Oh yeah, about ReBirth's ending. So, Christopher beats Dracula. He watches Castlavania crumble. There's a brief dialogue about how this won't be the last time this will happen. Then the credits roll. The end is simple and rather predictable, but that's okay. I like it that way. Oh yeah, the producer for ReBirth is Koji Igarashi. He was also the producer for Nano Breaker. Hello. Hello again. It's me, Wounded Edge. Just when you thought the video was over and you were free of me. No. Not anymore. This is the end slate. You got here from watching the whole video. Thank you for watching the video. That's cool. If you like the video, like the video. If you want to see another video, make sure you subscribe video. That's cool too. There's a couple of things I gotta bring up real quick. It has to be fast this time because I just microwaved a slice of pizza. It's 1 a.m. and I'm gonna have a slice of pizza before I go to bed. 1 a.m. pizza gang. Where you at? Make some noise. But there's a couple of things I have to talk about. Real quick. So for one thing, my friend, I was working on this video, and I kept it a big secret, and then randomly a friend of mine sent me on Discord a meme about Castlevania. And I'm like, huh, funny that. Isn't that a thing? Huh, that's a little coincidence, right? The meme in question is this. I'll put it on screen right now, I guess. You know, it's there. It's a Conan the Barbarian movie still. But it's you know, oh look, it's Simon, right? Because, you know, they got that wall meat in Castlevania games. And, you know, Conan kind of looks like Simon. Or rather, Simon kind of looks like Conan. That was probably the, it's probably what they were going for. But seeing this meme reminded me, like, oh, oops, this whole video, this whole script that I already had everything planned out and recorded, I completely forgot to go over, like, the health situation, because it was such a non-thing to think about, I guess. Because they don't handle health normally, these games, for the most part. Castlevania, The Adventure, the first Game Boy game. That game, there's no wall chicken. There's nothing hidden inside the walls or nothing. Instead, when you hit candles, sometimes a heart will drop out, and you pick up the heart and it heals you. And that is worth noting because, you know, most Castlevania games, the hearts are like the ammo for your sub-weapon. So that's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, Castlevania is already weird because the hearts are not health. The hearts are ammo. But then this game is like, well, in this one, the hearts are hearts. They are health. So this one's weird by proxy of not being weird, I guess. In Castlevania The Adventure ReBirth, you have sub-weapons, so the hearts are still just your ammo. And the wall chicken returns. So you can find some wall chicken. Apparently it's pork chop. It's not chicken, it's supposed to be pork chop in like the instruction manual, but I don't know. Everyone I've ever known has called it the chicken, the wall chicken. As for the middle game, Belmont's Revenge, the other one on Game Boy, I plumb entirely forget. I don't. I don't know. I could look it up real quick. I'm not gonna. Anyways, moving on. All three of these games are weird in their own way. So why wouldn't health also be a non-consistent thing? Something else super weird about these games that I did have in the script for the video, but then when I was recording it and putting it all together, I was like, nah, this doesn't make sense to put in here, so I'll just put it here at the end slate. Basically, so Simon Belmont, he's in the first Castlevania game, right? And then the third Castlevania game, Castlevania 3, you play as Trevor Belmont, and he's like his great-grandfather. He's from like 100 years before, right? So he's the first vampire hunter, or what have you. But that game and this game were in Adventure. Castlevania 3 and Castlevania Adventure on Game Boy were both in development at the same time. And they both say that they took place 100 years before, and therefore both of the guys are supposed to be Simon's grandpa. So in Castlevania 3, Trevor is the grandpa, and in Castlevania The Adventure, Christopher is the grandpa. I heard that, like, it was changed around again to be like, oh yeah, and Christopher is the real grandpa and Trevor is the great-great-grandpa. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You just pushed back somebody's entire life and time period by like an extra 100 years. Okay, sure. I know it's all video game stuff, and they didn't plan this stuff out back then, right? They didn't have no Marvel's Avengers multi-threaded stories from different things, so it doesn't really matter. But I thought it was worth pointing up. Even the collection that I was playing this on isn't consistent. Like when you look at the little text blurb for Castlevania 3, it says Trevor's 100 years ago. And it also says that for Christopher. Christopher's 100 years ago. And it's like, alright, so we just don't know who was taking place. Maybe one of these is like non-canon or something. Some like, oh jeez, where was it? I think it must be in like, I don't know, like a Japanese instruction manual, maybe, or something really obscure. Some piece of info somewhere says that Trevor's name is Trevor C. Belmont, and that the C stands for Christopher. So was his middle name given to his grandson Christopher, or is Trevor and Christopher supposed to be like the same guy? It's just a big mess. It doesn't matter. It's just a big mess. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this whole video. This is supposed to be the Halloween video. That's why it's releasing in October. I didn't say that at all throughout the entire video. Oh, I'm dumb. Well, I mean, it's Castlevania. It's spooky month. Probably most people can put two and two together. That's somewhat important, I guess, because I was already working on a different video for a different pair of games, which is still in the works. I wanted that video to be done by the end of September, but it just took too much time, and I didn't have I couldn't put it out soon enough. Very disappointed about that. And when October came around, I was like, well, I want to make a spooky October video because that'd be fun. And it was really fun. I hope you liked the video, because I sure as hell liked it. I sure as heck liked it, excuse me. I'm cussing, oh no. But yeah, that other video, that's like halfway done, I guess, I think, if I were to estimate. Well, no, it's like halfway recorded. I still have to put stuff together. That can take a long time. I think that's everything. Yeah. So like I said before, thanks for watching the video. Do you want to see more video? Check out other video. Check out the Nano Breaker video. I did not plan to be making 2 Konami game videos in a row. And one with Koji Igarashi as the guy. So when I figured that out at the end, I was like, oh, I could put a little Nano Breaker in the end. Oh, Nano Breaker. I'm starting to babble now. I'm gonna go get my pizza, my 1 a.m. pizza. You should go get your 1 a.m. pizza, if you are able to. And you have a good night. Goodbye.